Hey, what time is it where you're watching this right now? Seriously, pause for a second and think about it. Morning, afternoon, late night? And where are you? I'm asking because the time you're experiencing this message and the place you're discovering this truth matters more than you think. You see, your consciousness has guided you here at this exact moment for a reason. Because what I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you thought you knew about energy, power, and the hidden forces that have controlled humanity for over a century. And trust me when I tell you this, the reason they don't want you watching this at certain times, the reason algorithms suppress this knowledge, is because your state of awareness right now determines whether you'll truly understand the magnitude of what was stolen from you, from all of us, back in the 19th century. You've been told that energy must be paid for. That power comes from burning fossil fuels. That electricity is a scarce resource controlled by corporations and governments. But what if I told you that's the biggest, most elaborate lie ever perpetrated on humanity? What if everything you learned about energy, about physics, about the very nature of reality itself was deliberately twisted, suppressed, and hidden by a small group of powerful men who saw the greatest threat to their control emerging in the 1800s? See, back in the 19th century, something extraordinary was happening. Inventors, mystics, and scientific pioneers were discovering something that terrified the power structures of the world. They were tapping into what they called free energy, radiant energy, etheric power. Energy that existed all around us, infinite, accessible, and absolutely free. And when I say free, I don't just mean cheap. I mean requiring no fuel, no consumption, no depletion of resources, just pure, unlimited power drawn from the fabric of reality itself. Now, before you dismiss this as fantasy or conspiracy theory, understand that the evidence for this technology is everywhere once you know where to look. It's in the suppressed patents, in the destroyed laboratories, in the mysterious deaths of inventors who got too close to the truth, in the deliberate miseducation that shaped modern physics, and most importantly, it's in the ancient wisdom traditions that understood something about the nature of consciousness and energy that modern science refuses to acknowledge. Let's go back to the 1880s and 1890s. This was a pivotal moment in human history. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, but something else was brewing beneath the surface. Inventors like Nikola Tesla, Worrell Keely, Nathan Stubblefield, and dozens of others whose names have been erased from history were working on devices that could harness what Tesla called the wheelwork of nature. Tesla, probably the most famous of these inventors, openly talked about tapping into the Earth's natural electromagnetic field, about drawing power from the ionosphere, about wireless transmission of unlimited energy that would make power plants and fuel obsolete forever. But here's what they don't teach you in school. Tesla wasn't alone, and he wasn't the first. He was part of a wave of discovery happening simultaneously across the world, as if consciousness itself was ready to reveal this secret to humanity at that precise moment in history. In Philadelphia, Worrell Keely was demonstrating his sympathetic vibratory, devices that could levitate objects, disintegrate stone, and generate enormous power using nothing but tuning forks and water. Skeptics called him a fraud, but those who witnessed his demonstrations, including credible scientists and investors, couldn't explain what they saw using conventional physics. In Kentucky, Nathan Stubblefield was pulling electrical power directly from the Earth itself. No generators, no fuel, just metal rods driven into the ground and circuits that tapped into what he called Earth batteries. He powered lights, motors, and even transmitted signals wirelessly years before Marconi. Yet his work was systematically suppressed, and he died in poverty, alone and forgotten now. The question you should be asking is why? Why would revolutionary technology that could liberate, humanity from energy scarcity be suppressed? The answer takes us into the real conspiracy. And it's not just about money, though money is certainly part of it. It's about control. You see, by the late 19th century, powerful banking families and industrial monopolists had figured something out that changed the course of human civilization. They understood that whoever controlled energy controlled everything, controlled economies, controlled nations, controlled the future itself, and free energy, accessible to anyone, anywhere, represented an existential threat to that control. Think about it logically for a moment. If every home, every factory, every vehicle could access unlimited free energy, what happens to oil companies? What happens to coal mines? What happens to utility companies that charge you monthly for electricity? What happens to the entire economic model that concentrates wealth and power in the hands of a few? It collapses completely and utterly. And this is why, starting in the 1890s, you see a coordinated effort to suppress, discredit, and destroy free energy technology and the inventors who pursued it. J.P. Morgan, one of the most powerful bankers in history, was actually funding Nikola Tesla's research at Wardenclyffe Tower, a massive facility Tesla was building to provide free wireless electricity to the entire world. But here's where this gets really deep, and this is where the spiritual dimension comes in. Because free energy isn't just about technology, it's about consciousness. It's about understanding the true nature of reality. You see, these 19th century inventors weren't just engineers tinkering with circuits and magnets. Many of them were mystics, students of ancient wisdom, people who understood that consciousness and energy are fundamentally the same thing. Tesla himself studied Sanskrit, Hindu philosophy, and the Vedic sciences. He spoke about prana and akasha, about the luminiferous ether that modern physics claims doesn't exist, but which every ancient tradition knew was the fundamental substance of reality. He understood that what we call matter is just energy vibrating at different frequencies, and that by understanding these frequencies, these vibrations, we could tap into unlimited power. This wasn't just science. This was sacred knowledge, the same knowledge that built the pyramids, that powered ancient civilizations we've forgotten, that mystery schools protected for millennia. John Worrell Keely took this even further. His sympathetic vibratory technology was based on the principle that everything in the universe is connected through vibration, that by achieving resonance with the fundamental frequency of matter itself, you could manipulate physical reality in ways that seem like magic. He claimed that consciousness, human will, and intention was actually necessary to operate his devices, that the machines were interfaces between mind and matter. Now modern science dismisses this as pseudoscience. But what if Keely had discovered something profound? What if consciousness isn't separate from physical reality, but is actually the primary force that shapes it? This understanding completely changes everything. Because if free energy requires a shift in consciousness to access, then suppressing the technology isn't enough. You have to suppress the consciousness that could rediscover it. And this is exactly what happened in the 20th century. Starting in the early 1900s, you see a deliberate restructuring of education, of physics, of how we teach people to think about reality. The concept of the ether, which had been fundamental to physics for centuries, was suddenly declared non-existent after the Michelson-Morley experiment. Even though that experiment had major flaws and alternative interpretations, a materialistic, mechanistic worldview was enforced, one that treats the universe as a dead machine rather than a living, conscious field of energy. Any research into consciousness, into the relationship between mind and matter, into areas like psychic phenomena or subtle energy, was relegated to pseudoscience and ridiculed. Scientists who pursued these questions were defunded and discredited, their careers destroyed. This wasn't accidental. This was a deliberate program to ensure that humanity would never rediscover what those 19th century inventors had found. Because here's the ultimate secret. Free energy isn't just about electricity. It's about recognizing that you are a free energy device, that your consciousness can tap into the infinite field of energy that permeates all reality, that you don't need to be dependent on external systems, external authorities, external power sources. You are the power source, and that realization is the most dangerous idea to every system of control that exists. Let's examine the evidence more carefully, because I know some of you are thinking, this sounds too incredible. Where's the proof? The proof is everywhere once you start looking. First, there are the patents, hundreds of them filed in the late 19th and early 20th centuries for devices that generated over unity energy, meaning they produced more power than they consumed. These patents exist in government archives. You can look them up. Devices like the Figuera generator, the Hubbard coil, the Hendershot generator, and dozens of others, all claiming to tap into environmental energy sources, all granted patents by the U.S. Patent Office, which means they passed initial scrutiny, yet none of these devices ever made it to market. Why? Because starting in the 1940s, the U.S. Patent Office created a special classification system for patents related to free energy. These patents are immediately classified under national security and locked away. Inventors are issued gag orders under the National Security Act, threatened with imprisonment if they reveal their discoveries. This isn't speculation. This is documented fact. The Invention Secrecy Act of 1951 allows the government to suppress any patent deemed a threat to national security or detrimental to the national economy. Think about that phrase, detrimental to the national economy. They're literally saying that certain technologies are suppressed because they would disrupt the economy, which really means they would disrupt the profit and control of those who run the economy. Then there are the mysterious deaths and destroyed laboratories. Inventors throughout the 20th century who claimed to have working free energy devices often met tragic ends. Eugene Malov, a respected scientist who was investigating cold fusion and free energy, was murdered in 2004. Just before he was about to publish breakthrough research, Stanley Meyer, who invented a water fuel cell that could run a car on water, died suddenly at a restaurant in 1998. Witnesses said he ran out claiming, "They poisoned me." His devices and research were seized and have never been seen since. Dozens of others, from scientists to independent inventors, have had their labs mysteriously burned down, their prototypes stolen, their funding withdrawn, their reputations destroyed through smear campaigns in the media. This follows an exact pattern. When someone gets close to working free energy, forces mobilize to stop them, and these aren't random accidents or coincidences. This is systematic suppression. Now, and his research was scattered and suppressed, or consider Paul Pantone's GT fuel processor, which he claimed could run engines on up to 80% water. He demonstrated it publicly, received patents, started selling plans, then was arrested and confined to a mental institution for years under questionable circumstances. The pattern is always the same: demonstration, publicity, then suppression through legal attacks, confiscation, character assassination, or direct violence. And this pattern goes back to the 19th century, back to Tesla seeing his funding destroyed and his reputation tarnished, back to Keely dying with his secrets before he could properly document his technology, back to Stubblefield ending his life in poverty and obscurity. These weren't failures of the technology. These were successes of the suppression, because the power elite learned something crucial in the 19th century. They learned that technological suppression isn't enough. You have to control the narrative. You have to make people believe that free energy is impossible, that it violates the laws of physics, that anyone who pursues it is a crackpot or a fraud, and they've been incredibly successful at this. Mention free energy to most people today, and they'll immediately think of scams and perpetual motion machines. They've been conditioned to ridicule the very idea without investigating the evidence. This is psychological control at its most sophisticated level, making people police themselves, making them reject revolutionary ideas before even examining them. But let's go deeper into the spiritual dimension of this conspiracy, because this is where it connects to your awakening, to your consciousness expansion, to the very purpose of your existence in this reality. You see, the suppression of free energy technology is ultimately about suppressing your understanding of your own nature. Ancient wisdom traditions, from the Vedic sciences of India to the mystery schools of Egypt to the shamanic practices of indigenous cultures, all understood something fundamental. They knew that reality is made of consciousness, that what we call matter and energy are just consciousness vibrating at different frequencies. They knew that the human being is a transceiver, capable of tapping into and manipulating these frequencies. They knew that what we call psychic abilities, manifestation, healing, and yes, even free energy technology are all applications of the same fundamental principles. The Egyptian mystery schools taught about the Ka and the Ba, energy bodies that connect us to cosmic forces. The Hermetic teachings, preserved in texts like the Kybalion, explicitly state that all is mind, the universe is mental, that reality is a mental construct, and that by understanding the principles of vibration, rhythm, and polarity, we can influence physical reality. Tibetan Buddhism speaks of lung, or subtle energy that can be directed through meditation and intention. Chinese Taoism describes qi flowing through meridians and the natural world. All of these traditions understood that there's an underlying field of energy, call it ether, prana, chi, orgone, zero-point energy, the quantum field. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that this field exists, it's infinite, it's everywhere, and it can be accessed. Now here's the critical point that connects this to the 19th century conspiracy. Those inventors who were discovering free energy technology weren't just making machines. They were proving through physical demonstration what the mystics had always taught. They were showing that this unlimited field of energy is real, that it can be tapped, that it can power civilization, and most dangerously of all, that accessing it requires a shift in consciousness, requires understanding principles that the materialistic worldview denies. This is why the suppression had to be so complete. It wasn't just about protecting oil profits, though that was certainly part of it. It was about preventing humanity from waking up to its true nature, from realizing that we are not separate from this field of infinite energy, but are expressions of it, that we have within us the same power that these machines were tapping into, that we are, in our very essence, free. Think about how this changes your understanding of reality. If free energy exists, if there really is an infinite field of energy all around us, then scarcity is an illusion. All the systems of control, all the economic models, all the wars fought over resources, all the poverty and suffering caused by lack of access to energy, all of it is unnecessary. It's a construct, deliberately maintained to keep humanity enslaved, dependent, controllable. And this isn't just about physical energy, it's about spiritual energy too. Because the same forces that suppress free energy technology also suppress your awakening. They keep you distracted, exhausted, operating at low frequencies of fear and survival. Because when you raise your consciousness, when you access higher states of awareness, you begin to tap into that infinite field yourself. You become ungovernable. You realize you don't need their systems, their power grids, their economic models, their control structures. This is why meditation is subtly discouraged in mainstream culture, why genuine spiritual practices are commercialized and diluted, why altered states of consciousness are criminalized, why education focuses on memorization rather than consciousness expansion, why the fluoride in your water calcifies your pineal gland, the third eye, that ancient traditions knew was the gateway to higher perception. Every aspect of modern life is designed to keep you locked in a limited state of consciousness, operating at survival frequencies, never realizing the infinite power that dwells within you. And the free energy conspiracy of the 19th century is the perfect mirror for this. External free energy devices being suppressed reflects the suppression of your internal free energy capabilities. It's all connected. It's all one conspiracy. And it's all designed to keep humanity. It wasn't just a radio transmitter as mainstream history claims. It was a massive resonant cavity designed to tap into the Earth's electromagnetic field and the ionosphere, creating a standing wave that could transmit unlimited electrical power wirelessly to any point on the planet. Tesla's understanding was that the Earth itself is a huge dynamo, a giant magnet spinning in space, generating enormous electromagnetic potentials, and by tapping into the right frequencies, the resonant frequency of the Earth ionosphere cavity, which we now call the Schumann resonance, you could access virtually unlimited power. He demonstrated wireless lighting, wireless power transmission, and wireless communication decades before it became mainstream. But the version that became mainstream was neutered, controlled, metered, profitable. What's fascinating is that Tesla's understanding was deeply spiritual. He studied the Vedas. He understood the concept of akasha, the fundamental energy substrate of the universe. He once said, "All perceptible matter comes from a primary substance, or tenuity beyond conception, filling all space, the akasha or luminiferous ether, which is acted upon by the life-giving prana or creative force, calling into existence, in never-ending cycles, all things and phenomena." This isn't the language of a mere engineer. This is the language of a mystic, someone who understood that consciousness and energy are one, and his technology was an expression of that understanding. The reason Wardenclyffe was never completed wasn't just that J.P. Morgan pulled funding. It's that the implications of the technology were too revolutionary, too threatening to the entire power structure being constructed in that era. John Worrell Keely's work is even more mysterious and reveals even more about the consciousness-energy connection. Keely claimed that his devices operated on sympathetic vibration, that everything in the universe has a natural resonant frequency, and by matching that frequency, you could influence matter directly. He demonstrated lifting multi-ton weights with vibration, disintegrating stone, generating enormous mechanical power from small inputs. But here's what's crucial. He claimed his devices only worked when he operated them, that his conscious intention, his will, was necessary to tune the vibrations correctly. When skeptics tried to operate his machines, they often didn't work, leading to accusations of fraud. But what if Keely had actually discovered something profound? What if he'd found that consciousness is the key to manipulating energy? That the technology itself is just an amplifier, an interface for focused intention? This would explain why free energy technology has been so difficult to replicate and disseminate. It's not that the machines don't work. It's that they require the operator to be in a certain state of consciousness, to understand certain principles, to be awake in ways that most people aren't. This makes the technology inherently resistant to the kind of mass production and distribution that our current system demands. You can't just manufacture millions of free energy devices and sell them, like smartphones, because they require the user to have a certain level of consciousness development to operate them effectively. And this is the ultimate protection against suppression. Because while they can destroy laboratories, confiscate patents and silence inventors, they can't stop the evolution of consciousness itself. They can't prevent you from developing your own inner capacities, from learning to tap into that infinite field through meditation, through breath work, through energy practices, through consciousness expansion. This is why I'm telling you this story, not just to expose a historical conspiracy, but to show you that the same power they're hiding in classified patents and destroyed laboratories is inside you right now, waiting to be activated, waiting to be accessed, waiting for you to remember who you really are, what you really are. And the 19th century inventors gave us the roadmap. They showed us that it's possible. They proved it through working demonstrations. And even though their technology was suppressed, the knowledge couldn't be completely destroyed. It's preserved in old books, in whispered traditions, in the practices of mystery schools that still operate in the shadows, and most importantly, it's preserved in the akashic records, in the field of consciousness itself, accessible to anyone who develops the ability to perceive it. Let me take you deeper into some other suppressed technologies and what they reveal. There was Nathan Stubblefield's Earth battery system, which he demonstrated in the 1890s, powering lights and motors by simply driving metal rods into the ground. He wasn't extracting chemical energy from soil. He was tapping into the telluric currents, the natural electrical flows within the Earth itself, the same currents that indigenous shamans have worked with for millennia, the same currents that dowsers sense, the same currents that ley line researchers map. The Earth is alive. It's a conscious being with enormous energy flows coursing through it, and Stubblefield found a way to tap into these flows technologically. But his work was systematically suppressed. His patents were tied up in legal battles, his funding disappeared, and he died in poverty in 1928, forgotten by history. Why? Because if people understood that the Earth itself is a source of unlimited free energy, that we don't need to rape the planet for oil and coal, that we could work with the Earth's natural energy systems instead of against them, the entire extractive economy would collapse. More than that, people might start to perceive the Earth as the ancients did, as a living, conscious being, as Gaia, as a mother who provides for her children. And that perception would fundamentally change our relationship to the planet and to nature itself. Then there's Wilhelm Reich and his orgone energy research. Reich was a student of Freud who broke away to pursue his own theories about life energy. He discovered what he called orgone, a universal life force similar to prana or chi, and he built devices called orgone accumulators that could concentrate this energy, he claimed, and had considerable evidence that orgone energy could heal disease, influence weather, and potentially be used as a power source. The FDA, acting on behalf of forces that saw Reich as a threat, obtained an injunction against his work, ordering all his books and research burned. Yes, burned. In America, in the 1950s, Reich died in federal prison in 1957, and his research was largely destroyed. Why such extreme measures against one man's work? Because Reich had made the connection between sexual energy, life energy, and cosmic energy. He understood that the repression of natural sexual expression was tied to the repression of consciousness. That liberating life energy meant liberating human potential in ways that threatened all existing power structures. His work, like the free energy inventors before him, revealed too much about the true nature of reality and human potential. The pattern becomes clear when you examine case after case. Thomas Henry Moray developed a radiant energy device in the 1920s and 30s that he claimed could pull energy from cosmic rays. He demonstrated it multiple times, powering lights and appliances with a device that had no conventional power source. His device was shot at and destroyed by unknown assailants. His laboratory was raided multiple times, and he was unable to get patents or funding. He died in 1974 with his technology unreplicated. Lester Hendershot created a fuelless motor in the 1920s that allegedly ran on the Earth's magnetic field. He demonstrated it publicly, generated significant interest, then mysteriously stopped promoting it, and his device disappeared from public view. Townsend Brown discovered what he called electrogravitics, showing that charged capacitors experienced thrust in the direction of the positive pole, suggesting a connection between electricity and gravity. His research was classified. He worked on black projects for the military, and his civilian research was systematically defunded and marginalized. Every single one of these inventors, and dozens more I haven't mentioned, discovered something real, demonstrated something that challenged the conventional physics narrative, and was then suppressed through various means. This isn't coincidence. This is pattern, and patterns reveal design, reveal intention, reveal conspiracy. But let's talk about what happened in physics itself during this crucial period, because the suppression wasn't just technological, it was theoretical. It was about controlling what people believed was possible. In the late 19th century, physics was dominated by the concept of the luminiferous ether, the idea that space isn't empty, but filled with a subtle medium through which light and electromagnetic waves propagate. This ether was thought to be the fundamental substrate of reality, and it aligned perfectly with what ancient traditions had always taught about akasha prana, the universal energy field. Then in 1887, the Michelson-Morley experiment supposedly proved that the ether didn't exist. This experiment, which attempted to measure Earth's motion through the ether by comparing the speed of light in different directions, found no difference, leading to the conclusion that there was no ether. Einstein's special relativity, published in 1905, then provided a mathematical framework that didn't require the ether, and by the 1920s, the ether concept was completely abandoned by mainstream physics. But here's what they don't tell you. The Michelson-Morley experiment had serious problems. First, it assumed the ether was completely stationary while the Earth moved through it. But what if the ether moves with the Earth, at least partially? That would explain the null result without requiring that the ether doesn't exist. Second, there were other experiments, like the Sagnac experiment and later the Michelson-Gale experiment, that did show results consistent with an ether, but these were ignored or explained away. Third, numerous physicists, including some very credible ones, proposed alternative interpretations that preserved the ether concept, but these were marginalized and forgotten. Why was it so important to eliminate the ether from physics? Because the ether represented something more than just a medium for light propagation. It represented the idea that space itself is full of energy, that there's a substrate to reality that connects everything, that could potentially be tapped for unlimited power. Without the ether, you get the modern physics view of space as empty vacuum, of energy as scarce, of power as requiring fuel and consumption. With the ether, you get the ancient view of space as fullness, plenum, an ocean of energy, in which we swim, from which unlimited power could theoretically be drawn. The abandonment of the ether wasn't just a scientific decision, it was a philosophical and ultimately a political decision, because it closed off an entire avenue of investigation, an avenue that could have led to free energy technology becoming mainstream in the early 20th century. Instead, we got quantum mechanics and relativity, brilliant theories in many ways, but theories that reinforced scarcity, that maintained the impossibility of free energy, that kept the door firmly shut on the kinds of discoveries Tesla, Keely, and others were making. And here's something fascinating. In modern times, physics is actually quietly bringing back concepts very similar to the ether. Quantum field theory describes space as filled with quantum fields. The vacuum isn't empty but seething with virtual particles, constantly popping in and out of existence. The zero-point energy field supposedly contains enormous amounts of energy in every cubic centimeter of space. Some calculations suggest there's enough energy in the space inside a coffee cup to boil all the world's oceans. Now, they claim this energy can't be extracted, that it would violate the second law of thermodynamics. But isn't that just another way of maintaining? This brings us to a crucial spiritual understanding. The physical suppression of free energy technology mirrors a metaphysical suppression of your consciousness. Because accessing free energy, whether technological or spiritual, requires the same fundamental shift in perception. You have to stop seeing reality as separate, dead, mechanical, and start seeing it as unified, alive, conscious. You have to understand that you're not separate from the energy field, but are a focal point of it, an expression of it, a way that the field experiences itself. When you meditate, when you do breath work, when you practice energy cultivation techniques from traditions like Qigong or Kundalini Yoga, what are you doing? You're learning to consciously access and direct subtle energy. You're doing internally what those 19th century inventors were doing externally. You're tapping into the infinite field. And the more people who learn to do this, the more people who awaken to their true nature as consciousness itself, the harder it becomes to maintain the systems of control. Because control requires separation, requires people feeling isolated, powerless, dependent. But when you know, not just intellectually but experientially, that you're connected to infinite energy, to infinite consciousness, to infinite creative power, you become free in a way that no system can contain. This is why the conspiracy goes beyond just technology and economics into culture, education, religion, media. Every institution is designed to keep you locked in a limited identity, to make you believe you're just a biological machine, a consumer, a worker, a voter, but not a creator, not a being of infinite potential, not a spark of the divine consciousness that underlies all reality. Organized religion, in its mainstream forms, teaches you to worship an external God and follow external rules, not to discover the divinity within yourself. Education teaches you to memorize facts and follow instructions, not to think critically or develop your consciousness. Media fills your mind with fear, division, distraction, keeping you at survival frequencies where awakening becomes impossible. Even science, which claims to be objective truth-seeking, has become a priesthood that declares certain questions off-limits, certain possibilities impossible, not through investigation, but through dogma. The suppression of free energy technology in the 19th century was the physical manifestation of a much deeper agenda. An agenda to keep humanity locked in a prison of consciousness, to prevent us from realizing our true nature, our true power. And the 19th century was a crucial turning point, because that's when humanity was on the verge of a breakthrough, technological and spiritual. Imagine if Tesla's wireless power system had been completed, if every home had free energy, if transportation required no fuel, if abundant energy had lifted all of humanity out of poverty and scarcity. How different would the 20th century have been? No oil wars, no energy crisis, no economic control through utility monopolies. And with abundant energy would have come abundant consciousness. Because when your survival needs are met, when you're not struggling just to pay bills and survive, you naturally begin to ask deeper questions, to explore consciousness, to develop spiritually, Abundant energy creates abundant consciousness, and abundant consciousness creates awakened humans who cannot be controlled. This is the ultimate reason for the suppression, not just the profits of oil companies, not just the power of utility monopolies, but the maintenance of consciousness at a level where humanity remains controllable, manageable, asleep. And this suppression has been incredibly successful for over a century now. But here's the beautiful thing. It's failing. You're watching this video right now, which means you're part of the awakening. You're part of a global consciousness shift that's been accelerating. Especially over the last few decades, more people are meditating, exploring altered states, questioning mainstream narratives, discovering suppressed knowledge. And this is creating a resonance, a collective frequency shift that's making it harder and harder for the old control systems to function. They can suppress technology, they can burn books, they can silence inventors, but they can't stop the evolution of consciousness itself, because consciousness isn't located in your brain. It's not something they can control or confine. It's the fundamental nature of reality itself, and it's waking up, expressing itself through billions of humans who are starting to remember who they really are. Now I want to get practical for a moment, because this isn't just about understanding history or exposing conspiracy. It's about your awakening, your empowerment, your liberation. So what can you actually do with this knowledge? First, understand that you don't need to wait for external technology to be released. You don't need scientists to finally admit that free energy is possible. You don't need governments to declassify suppressed patents, because you are the technology. Your consciousness, your energy body, your intention, and will are the ultimate free energy devices. And there are practices you can begin immediately to develop these capacities. Meditation isn't just relaxation, it's training your consciousness to access and direct subtle energy. When you sit in silence and feel into the space around and within you, you're beginning to perceive the field, the ether, the zero-point energy, whatever you want to call it. You're training yourself to sense what the instruments can't measure, what mainstream science denies exists. Breath work, particularly practices like tummo breathing from Tibetan Buddhism or pranayama from yoga, these aren't just breathing exercises, they're methods of manipulating your internal energy, moving prana through your system, activating dormant capacities. Wim Hof has shown that through specific breathing techniques, humans can consciously control their autonomic nervous system, influence their immune response, even withstand extreme cold. This is just the beginning of what's possible. These practices demonstrate that consciousness can directly influence physical reality, starting with the physical body. Energy cultivation practices like Qigong or Tai Chi teach you to feel and direct Qi, life energy. You learn to sense blockages, to clear stagnant energy, to draw fresh energy from the environment, from the earth, from the cosmos. Ancient practitioners of these arts developed extraordinary abilities, from healing others to demonstrating telekinesis to living to extreme ages. These weren't myths. They were the result of decades of dedicated practice in consciousness and energy manipulation. Shadow work and psychological integration are crucial too, because blocked emotions, unprocessed trauma, limiting beliefs, these create energetic blockages that prevent you from accessing your full potential. The conspiracy counts on you staying fragmented, staying wounded, staying locked in patterns of fear and survival. When you do the deep work of healing, of integrating your shadow, of releasing old programming, you quite literally increase your energetic capacity. You become able